Tonight, home is something you barely think about. A roof above your head, walls that keep the wind outside, a door you can lock before going to sleep. 30,000 years ago, choosing the wrong shelter could mean your family never saw the next sunrise. But ancient humans had no houses waiting at the end of the day, no permanent shelter, no place guaranteed to keep the cold away. Only whatever they could build before deadly exposure claimed another life. So how did humans survive when home didn't really exist? Most of us imagine the Ice Age as a battle against freezing temperatures. That seems like the obvious answer. If the world was colder, people simply had to survive the cold. But that explanation leaves one important question unanswered. Ancient humans crossed frozen landscapes for thousands of years. They raised families. They explored new territories. They returned every winter to a world that never became easier. If they had no modern homes, why didn't the Ice Age erase them? That single question leads to one of the most remarkable survival stories in human history. To answer that question, we first need to understand the world ancient humans faced every single day. The Ice Age was more than a colder climate. It was a landscape that never stopped changing. Across endless open plains, the wind swept freely with almost nothing to slow it down. Snow buried old footprints. It erased familiar paths. It transformed the land after every storm. Places that felt safe one week could become completely exposed the next. Every journey meant stepping into an environment that was always changing. Certainty was almost impossible to find. This was not a place that welcomed human life. It tested every decision people made. Before we can understand how ancient humans survived this world, we first need to understand what made it so dangerous. The greatest danger of the Ice Age wasn't always the temperature. It was what happened when the human body stayed exposed to that frozen world for too long. The wind never stopped searching for warmth. Every gust stole a little more heat from exposed skin, moisture on the body, or simply spending too much time in the open made that loss happen even faster. The danger didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly. At first, your fingers lost their precision. Your legs felt heavier. Simple decisions became harder to make. Without realizing it, your body was using more and more of its energy just to stay warm. That was the quiet danger of deadly exposure. It didn't need a blizzard. It didn't need a single catastrophic moment. It only needed time. If the environment could slowly wear down every person who entered it, what made humans so vulnerable in the first place? The answer begins with one uncomfortable truth. Humans were never built for the Ice Age. Unlike many animals around them, they carried no thick fur to trap warm air and no heavy layer of fat beneath their skin. Every cold wind reached the body almost immediately, pulling away precious warmth with each passing minute. That weakness came with a constant cost. Every extra step through the snow demanded more energy. Every minute spent in the open forced the body to work harder, just to stay alive. Survival wasn't only a fight against the environment, it was a race against the body's own limits. By every natural advantage, humans should have lost. But nature was never the only thing changing. Humans couldn't change the Ice Age, but they could change where they faced it. The first shelters didn't look like homes. They didn't need to. A rocky overhang, the entrance to a cave, a shallow hollow beneath a cliff. Any place that could break the wind became valuable. Even a small barrier could slow the loss of body heat and give people a better chance of surviving the day. Ancient humans weren't searching for comfort. They were searching for separation. Just a few steps behind a rock could feel completely different from standing in the open. The wind weakened. The air became calmer. For a short time, the frozen world lost some of its power. But places like these were never guaranteed. Nature offered protection, only when it decided to. Nature never promised that shelter would be there when humans needed it most. Imagine walking for an entire day across a frozen plain. The wind follows every step. Your face burns with cold. As the light begins to fade, you search the horizon for a cliff, a cave, anything that might break the wind. But the landscape stays empty. That feeling was as dangerous as the cold itself. A shelter that existed yesterday might be days away today. A familiar rock formation could be buried beneath drifting snow. Every journey began with uncertainty, and uncertainty had a price. For ancient humans, survival could never depend on finding the perfect place. It had to depend on something more reliable. That was the greatest weakness of natural shelter. It could save your life, but only if it happened to be there. And the Ice Age rarely gave people exactly what they needed. For a long time, survival depended on finding the right place. A cave, a rocky overhang, anything that could block the wind, but those places were never guaranteed. Then came a different idea. What if protection didn't have to be found? What if it could be made? Picture a small group stopping before sunset. The open plain offers nothing. No cliffs, no caves, no natural cover. Instead of searching any farther, they begin to build. Wooden poles are pushed into the frozen ground. Animal hides are stretched across a simple frame. Within minutes, an empty patch of frozen land becomes a place where the wind begins to lose its strength. That was the real breakthrough. Ancient humans stopped depending on the landscape to decide where they could survive. They learned how to create protection wherever the journey came to an end. Now, shelter could travel with them. Learning to build shelter changed everything. But doing it once was never enough. A good shelter wasn't built by chance. People had to know where the wind usually came from. They had to choose the ground carefully. They had to gather the right materials before darkness arrived. Each winter taught another lesson. Each journey added another mistake to avoid. Parents showed their children what worked. The oldest members remembered what had failed. Little by little, shelter became more than something people built. It became something they understood. A shelter could be left behind. The knowledge to build it could travel anywhere. This changed everything. Night falls over the frozen plain. The wind grows louder with every passing hour. Inside a small shelter, no one is sleeping. A father presses one hand against the wooden frame. He feels it shake, but it holds. A child listens as the wind howls just beyond the hide walls. The cold is still outside. It never stops trying to get in. Hour after hour, the shelter stands, not because it is stronger than the storm, but because someone knew where to build it, how to build it, and when to build it. By the first light of morning, the storm has passed. The shelter will not last forever. It had already done the only thing that mattered. It gave one family something the frozen world almost never promised. One more sunrise. When one winter ended, the shelter itself might disappear. Animal hides wore out. Wooden frames collapsed. Wind and snow slowly erased almost every sign that people had ever lived there. But something else remained, the memory of what had worked. A child watched older hands choose the safest place. Before the wind arrived, a family remembered which shelter stayed warmer through the longest nights, season after season. Those small lessons were shared, remembered, improved. That may have been humanity's greatest advantage. Not stronger shelters, not stronger bodies, the ability to learn and to make the next shelter better than the last. Shelters protected people for a night. Knowledge gave them a future. Today, shelter is something most of us rarely think about. We step inside, close the door, leave the wind outside without a second thought. For ancient humans, every shelter was a choice. Every choice was another chance to survive one more freezing night. They didn't survive because the Ice Age became less dangerous. They survived because they learned how to create safety where none existed. But every shelter shared one unavoidable weakness. Sooner or later, everyone had to leave it, and once they stepped back into the frozen wind, the battle for survival began all over again, because a shelter could protect the place where you slept. But the Ice Age was waiting, the moment you stepped outside.